Hello and welcome back to Sinews of War. In the previous episode we faced a decisive battle with Sweden fighting over Finland. It was a regular line battle, actually quite the change from the usual fight, and it proved to be easy. We had superior firepower, positioning and cavalry and took the Swedish down. We got started on our invasion of South America, besieging one of their main forces inside a town, waiting for them to attack us or run out of supplies. We moved Courland with a fresh army to support Voss in his move to take Cairo in the Middle East. We were attacked by a major Polish force in Galicia, and it looked like we were going to lose the battle, but the last stand started to turn into a victory when the enemy just threw their troops away and failed to use their artillery, so now the battle should be ours. Sir, I think we need to reposition to—
Are you another one of the Earth God's peons? You dare question me like the rest? I am artillery incarnate. I will destroy land, sea and sky with powder and shot. I will bring darkness to the world under an unrelenting barrage of despair.
Alright. Well, we'll leave the guns where they are then.
Good. There are few worthy enough to serve me, but perhaps you will come to realize my genius in time. Let it be Poland, Lithuania who brings about the artillery apocalypse, stepping forward where the cowardly Spanish have fallen. Even after they lost everything, my artillery still fired, and yet they cast me out like some common lord of musketry or a feeble lord of pikes. Soon they, like everyone else, will bow before I, the dark artillery lord, and tremble in tandem with their dying world.
You there, in the cloak? What are you doing? General, I thought you sent this man to lead us. He just showed up and started—
You will know who I am when you stare into the abyss and see death for the first and last time.
Right. Do you actually have a name?
They call me the horror of horrors, the darkness at the end of the world, the spirit of all the hells.
Cool. So you know you're just shooting the ground?
I know more than has ever been known. The past, present, and future are mine to command, and with such power I choose but a single path: destruction.
Oh, I see. Well, bloody carry on, we've lost this thing anyway. General, wait, I think we need our old officer back.
You deny my power. Now you must atone for your sins. Go, take this sword and attack the enemy walls. See if you can exceed my achievements with your mortal methods, and in witnessing your own failure, be humbled in my dark embrace.
Okay, sir. So the enemy's artillery, crucial in a fort assault, have been busy destroying a nearby hill, but interestingly they decided to send one of their crew out on a mission, it seems. He starts just jogging away, so perhaps they got bored of shooting the hillside and thought they'd actually send at least one of their members to go and participate in the battle. So his contribution is going to be that he jogs up to our fort wall and is going to have to destroy it without the use of his actual artillery pieces. Unfortunately, that does prove difficult, and instead he just gets locked in a time vortex and walks in very slow motion while gradually sliding along the side of the wall. So less effective than perhaps his officers had expected. Meanwhile, the rest of the battle is still going on. There's just not really much happening. Lots of enemy units firing at my guys firing back, and neither side can really see each other because they're at too steep an angle. So basically nothing happening, just waiting for the timer to run out. That guy did eventually go back to his crew, by the way. I guess he gave up on his mission for some reason, decided to rejoin his comrades, and while I was watching that I was actually sneak attacked by some cavalry. I didn't even realise I had my cavalry outside of the fort, so I ordered them back, and we actually took heavy losses here. At the very least though, I managed to get the battle to take place just below some of my gunmen, so we shot loads of enemy cav. My unit though was destroyed in this little engagement, which is very unfortunate. Nearby you can see enemy units who tried to climb up the wall and routed right away, just going right back down to run away, and every time they do that they're going to be taking losses, so we'll gradually be defeating them. Now unfortunately it seemed my gate was actually open when that little cav battle was happening, so the enemy's victorious cav now rushed inside the fort. That is did not see this coming, and now my mortar team in the middle is in big danger. I was looking around to see how do I make them drop the pieces and run, but actually you can't. You have to put them into melee in order to get them to run. But first I wanted to bring down reinforcements from the walls to come and take out these cavalry, because ultimately the fate of the mortar team is unimportant here. So some infantry arrive to drive the cavalry away and take them down. One member of the mortar team has survived. You can see I'm constantly clicking to try and get them out. Unfortunately, they're all just dying, but this one guy managed to get hit out of the engagement. So he's actually now going to have a chance of surviving, especially with the enemy's cav now distracted by the fact that all my infantry are piling onto them. So there we go, that one man escaping to tell the tale of the surprise in the fort cavalry ambush from the enemy. Did not expect that, but the cav, no chance now. They're going to fight on. There goes another unit just to totally surround them. So we take those guys out, and once again the fort is secure. Now the rest of the enemy's cav is doing a classic Empire Total War shuffle. They're just sliding around outside. No real clues as to what their plan is, but they are all gradually moving towards the edge of the map, perhaps hoping to escape from my fort's artillery fire or to just withdraw without seeming too withdrawy, but basically nothing happening, and the artillery continuing to fire, actually hitting their own men. They're firing at a piece of ground so close to themselves, and they've actually taken quite a few losses in this battle, and of course, as we saw from the pile of bodies in front of them, have shot tons of their own troops as well. So eventually the timer runs out and it's declared a heroic victory for the forces of the United Provinces. Didn't really expect that, but in retrospect perhaps I should have. That is the sort of thing that tends to happen. We just somehow won. The enemy's loss is massive in comparison to ours despite their huge initial advantage. So a fantastic result, perhaps not actually deserved, but that's what happened. Now Poland and Lithuania don't have any more attacks for us, but they do take some territory from Prussia, which is worrying to see. We want Prussia to be winning that war, and a few forces moving around in our own provinces recently taken from them, so we'll have to go and finish them off. Now the Ottoman Empire shuffling around up near Istanbul, but more importantly gathering lots of forces up at Jerusalem and sending one of the stacks in to actually make an attack. We've abandoned the settlement already, so it's just the garrison of 2 units who unfortunately are not being given the chance to surrender by the enemy, so they have to fight and lose, and the Ottomans will take Jerusalem. But we should be in a position to take it back once Cordland teams up with Voss. Ottomans very clearly stealing my technology there. Finally, we see New Spain move their fleet, their survivors from the big decisive battle, down to besiege another one of my forts, blocking my trade, but not really worried about trade from one region at this point.
Ik adviseer je om je goederen zo dicht mogelijk bij de haven te houden als je kan. Ik wil alles te water laten op het moment zelf dat de blokkade wordt opgegeven. Ik verwacht niet dat het lang zal duren. Zelfs voordat iemand uitgewerkt had van wie de oorlogsschepen waren, had ik al doorgekregen dat Curaçao een vloot aan het voorbereiden is. Ze verzekeren mij dat het de laatste keer was dat we nog een verbreking van militaire natuur tegemoet gaan. Dus laten we dat niet vergeten. Ontsla zoveel mogelijk van je bemanning als je kan. Dankzij de blokkade zullen er genoeg wanhopige zeilen te zijn die onze schepen op proberen te komen op het moment dat ze de ankerkettingen zien reizen. Met een beetje geluk lukt het ons om ze voor een minimumprijs te krijgen en er een wel degelijk profijt van te maken. De gezegende West-Indische Compagnie zal de verliezen ondertussen wel betalen.
I had sent a couple of new ships to trade in the East Indies, and luckily, while going to sort that out, noticed that the Swedish had also appeared in the East Indies with a small little fleet there, so we're going to have to try and bring that one down. I need to make a temporary fleet out of all the trading ships around the place. I'm going to leave out some of the really damaged ones because some of these boats are just captured enemy ships that are basically sinking already, so I don't want to risk them in battle. So I bring the fleet over, gigantic advantage, using the autosave in case it just tells me we're going to lose the whole fleet for some reason, as it sometimes does, but actually it's exactly what we expect. So now we can divide the ships back up to continue our dominance of the East Indies trade theatre. Now, along similar lines, I've sent a fleet to go and start investigating what's happening in East Africa, in the knowledge that there's a Maratha fleet somewhere here, and there it is. It's actually just some very small ships and only a couple of them, so we can come in with our war fleet and absolutely obliterate it, actually capturing one of the boats, which I will take since we can use that for trading purposes. Now, looking around, we can see that most of the trade nodes actually aren't being occupied, so that means we can take a virtual monopoly on this theatre right now. I don't know why any other powers haven't come in to exploit this. There are lots of powers literally queuing up in Brazil to take over my trade nodes, but I guess they just don't know about the situation over here. Now, it is a bit of a waste to have all of my warships being used for trading purposes, so I'll just want to keep them there for a few turns while I construct some new trade ships. And luckily, thanks to my conquest of the Indian mainland, we now have lots of new ports to put to work on this. I can construct ships a lot more quickly than I could previously with the East India Company, so that's really going to help. Now jumping over to Egypt, it's time to go and take Cairo. With Goss and Cortland teaming up, they have no chance and they rightly surrender to him, so we take it without a fight. The place isn't particularly advanced, so we're going to start upgrading the roads right away, and there's also some opportunities for upgrading in the very large territory this town actually comes from. But the most important thing about this is that it means there's no longer any Ottoman forces to the west of where our main forces are stationed, so from here on out we can just push east without having to be looking behind us. And so in order to start doing that, we might as well move out right away, since Cairo is actually quite happy to be under our control, probably because the Ottomans were ruining it, so we're not going to tax them, we're going to boost their economy up so that it'll be more profitable for us in the future. So the main forces move out, and hopefully we'll be able to take back Jerusalem, recently lost, with our overwhelming advantage there, and start to actually damage the Ottomans as I had originally intended with that whole rear attack plan. Now, on the Polish front, I noticed that Lithuania is totally undefended, so that's very interesting. But before I did anything with that, I wanted to see if Sweden would go to peace with me. Previously, they said they wouldn't, and they still say they won't, which is really annoying because I don't want to invade their territory. It's so large, such a long way to invade it, and no real benefit for me. It's certainly not one of my victory provinces, so it's just annoying that I have to have this full stack up here. I realised it wasn't even at full strength, so I'll start replenishing it. And the Swedish are also marauding around near St. Petersburg. I probably could stop them with the few forces I have there, but I'm just not that bothered right now, so I'm not going to risk anything. I'm also busily reinforcing my fronts with Poland a little further to the west, so I think defensively we're now getting pretty good. The only place they could attack is Galicia again with their remnants of their main force, but we may be able to win that. And as we saw just there, I sneakily take Lithuania off them with my reserve army. So it's Poland-Lithuania no longer, just Poland now. They're probably feeling the pressure of their constant decisions to go to war with me. I'm going to use this rake to have a little look in their remaining core regions, not really spotting much in the way of military forces, so I decided they would probably want peace with me, and when I asked them they immediately agreed. So I probably should have pressed harder terms, but it doesn't really matter right now. The point is, by not being at war with Poland, we should free up a decent number of the forces in the area to go and help out against the Ottomans, or indeed the Swedish if we really want to. And I'm secretly hoping that actually, now that we've damaged Poland so much, the Prussians will just take them out and this territory will just be controlled by one of my allies instead. Now, I prematurely hit end turn because this was in between playing sessions. There's some stuff I forgot to do. First, I'm going to move this fleet over towards Amsterdam in order to guard against Swedish attacks. Then I had an army moving into Mexico to besiege this settlement. I thought they might surrender since we have an advantage, but they don't, so I'm just going to leave that siege for now. We probably could just do the battle and take it if we wanted, but not really that important. Now, during the end-turn sequence, the Maratha forces we have under siege sally out and seem to have an advantage on the balance bar, which I thought is probably one of those balance bar lies, since we have over 2 armies of powerful, experienced troops holding them back. But I decided on this occasion that I would humour the balance bar. We've had so many auto-resolves against the Marathi, I thought let's actually do a battle. Their army is mostly melee troops actually, which is exactly the sort of army we've had trouble with in the past. And on the day, it's really heavily raining, which also favours the enemy's use of melee troops, since lots of our muskets and cannons have a chance to misfire in these conditions. So as the battle gets going, we're going to bombard them with our big artillery advantage, but they are just going to advance right towards us, as you might expect for a melee-based army. And our troops are just standing in a big line using cavalry defences rather than the usual trenches, since of course there's probably not going to be much actual back and forth line battling here. I think it's just going to be a grind. Now, of course, the enemy see my cavalry defences and decide, you know what, let's test them. They send a unit of cavalry, just the one, ahead of their army to charge my line. I'm going to be forming my infantry into a square, but not too important because a decent number of their horses actually go right into the defences, stop, and then jump onto them again, killing themselves. And that actually shatters the unit, and as the unit tries to escape, it goes back over the cavalry defences, so the guys who escaped it the first time die the second time, and they lose basically everything. So, a very good start to this battle. My use of the cavalry defences paying off in an unsurprisingly easy way. And of course it wouldn't be an Empire Total War Sally battle without a mortar team charging our line, but unfortunately for them, they got cut down despite the heavy rain, and they are going to run off routing quite easily. So soon the rest of their army was actually going to move up. The problem they're going to have is that a lot of their units are trashy with low morale, so even though we're not really killing them with our ranged fire, they just turn back because they don't like being under ranged fire. So it's going to be a slow case as they gradually move up in waves, getting closer and closer to our line, constantly routing and falling back. And you can see we're not doing much damage to them whilst they're under fire from us, but they only need to take a bit of damage to have permanent morale damage, and maybe that doesn't matter. They had one unit of actual gun troops trying to sneak around my flank, but they turned away when they realised that's a terrible idea, as all of my company cav burst from the flanks to destroy this unit. It's going to try and escape, but ultimately fail, and they are terrible in melee, so they are going down. So I think we can see where this battle is going. The balance bar was indeed lying. It's quite marvellous, isn't it? When I first set foot in this scorched land, I was beset by difficulties, but in retrospect it seems many of them were simply products of my own mind. With good men and strong faith, the battlefield becomes rather like a show, a neat display of our rehearsed action. A shame about the weather, but think back to all those days when you would have given a limb for the relief of a downpour like this. A refreshing weather, an enemy army built of cowards and led by fools, the prospect of a fine bath in the city when victory is ours. I don't think I've ever been so happy to be a leader of men. Just a shame about what all this damp will do to the wounded. Now the centre of the battlefield quickly becomes a mess as my cavalry rush in to attack the enemy's units as they fall back from the main line, so that's going to make their routes even more deadly. Plenty of units still coming on though, and one unit actually did make it to my ranks and started a melee engagement, which they lost of course, but doing some damage to my forces, evidenced by the bodies all over the floor in this area. But we are going to reform to receive their forces again when they come back from routing inevitably. Meanwhile, all my native Indian lancers going around and smashing up melee units before they can reach the line, something they can do pretty easily with their deadly charges. Some of them did make it back though, so the battle resumed, going to cause big casualties to both sides. My grenadiers, good in melee, were unfortunately facing the wrong direction, so both failed to shoot the enemy before they arrived and are very slow in actually starting this fight, so the enemy are just slashing at them. They take it like men though, and finally decide to hit back, immediately annihilating those two guys in melee with them, and now they'll be able to shoot into the side of the enemy unit and take it down. So very quickly, things coming to a close. A cavalry charge on the last remaining unrouted enemy unit on the corner of the battlefield finishes them off, although they were surprisingly willing to keep fighting even without all of their allies, and this battle comes to a close. It is a victory, as you might have guessed. Our losses minimal in comparison to those of the enemy, who have been basically wiped out in this fight. It was an absolute disaster for the Maratha Confederacy. Only one of our units taking significant losses, and it was also the one that got the most kills. That was the unit that fought in the melee I mentioned, and our Indian native Cav pulling most of the weight. Aside from that, smashing enemies in the center. Didn't really show much of that, but they had a very good day today. But anyway, we're going to move on from that battle because it was unimportant and move on to a much more important battle. And here, the balance bar isn't lying. This actually does look like it could be a balanced engagement. It's time for the main force of the West India Company to face the main force of New Spain. They're sallying out from their fortifications and bringing loads of line infantry, cavalry, and absolutely loads of fixed artillery. So they almost have an artillery advantage here. They have lots of it, but it's lower in quality compared to mine. So we'll just have to see how they use it here. I deploy all of our line infantry in a big long line, funnily enough, using the trenches for defense. Redeploy my artillery there just so it can see over the top of the line infantry, hopefully, and hiding my cav. Let's have a look at the enemy forces. Most of them currently inside their gigantic star fort, and they've got all this artillery, but right now they're actually setting it up where it is, where it deployed at the start of the battle, and that is a pretty poor decision actually. They probably think they can shoot my line from here because they're technically in range, but they can't see it because they're inside the fort and can't shoot over the walls, so they can't do anything. A couple of cannons managed to fire at some of my exposed cav, but they're actually just shooting into their own command headquarters, so overall basically negligible use of the artillery. It's going to have no impact on anything used like that. Now eventually their infantry started to come into play, and what they did was an equally poor strategy. They moved some of the infantry to just stand in front of my line while others waited inside the fort. I decided to try and test the explosive shells I'd invented for the howitzer cannons I'd brought, but they proved pretty disappointing, all falling really far short of the target on the first volley. Waited for the second volley, and it was a little bit better this time, getting almost all the way to the target. It seems they're having a little bit of trouble ranging these things. I think when they do hit, they do more damage than a regular shell, but it seems they just aren't particularly accurate. I'm sure we should have got some hits, especially on the enemy's flank. It's quite close to us at the moment, well within the range of regular shot. But anyway, you can see what the enemy are doing here. They form their infantry in a big line, and that line's inside the fort and outside the fort on both sides. So you can sort of imagine the order that the AI gave, and it's basically completely the wrong thing to do. So after taking tons of artillery from me, they eventually decided to change their strategy up, but it turned out that what they changed it to was the same thing but in reverse. So the units on the other side of the fort came onto this side of the fort, and the ones that were here getting shot have run round to stand on the other side. So that wasn't particularly good either. You can see them running off there around the edge of the fort. So now we're just going to keep firing at them with our artillery. Unfortunately, most of my regular cannons don't have proper line of sight because the way the hills are set up are pretty bad. I was also worried there they might find my exposed cab hidden around the side of the fort, but they're actually still hidden, so we are lucky in that regard. So we're just going to keep blasting the enemy until something happens.
With an arrogant boldness, the homesick Spaniards sent companies to stand before their mighty walls, presenting their flanks to Voorhees as a sign of contempt. With equal contempt, Voorhees began a raid of chemical marvels, dropping searing fire via skyward shells, quickly seeing the Spanish scurry for safety. Of the endless rows of guns their commander had so recently boasted of, we saw nothing. They were, as we would later learn, real enough. Only they were completely paralysed, whether it be by the poor quality of their orders or the wanting quality of their bravery shall be known only to God. Presently, one by one, Spaniards reappeared before us and advanced. The men readied their muskets with wry smiles, and Voorhees drank deep from his flask.
Soon the enemy did gather up a more sizable portion of their infantry to come round onto our side of the fort and started forming some sort of line as if they were going to come in for a line battle, which is what I want, and sure enough they did. And I was delighted to see, zooming in now, that not only did they not have bayonets, they do not have the ability to fire by rank, so it's only the disordered couple of first ranks firing against us, gonna have cycling volleys from each rank one at a time in perfect unison, plus the protection of our trenches, meaning their return fire will be less effective than usual. So we have just about the largest range advantage we could possibly get from a battle between line infantry, so that is fantastic news, of course. On the flank they've got this unit positioned weirdly, standing slightly at an angle, and just a few men on the edge sniping away at my line. We're going to try and draw them in so they can get the fight going properly, since we will almost definitely defeat them in that case. So here, a tiny bit later, loads of units now showing up for line battling, which is perfect, and some units already falling back to the heavy casualties we're inflicting upon them. Going to try and use the explosive shot again to fire into their close stationary units, might be more successful in this case. And now I've got these mounted auxiliaries who are going to come up to fire onto the flanks of the end of the enemy's line there, while that unit is already engaged by my line infantry. Should pretty quickly be able to take those guys down, and soon enough we see the enemies are routing on the flank there. I was thinking I could just go and do the same to other units, but actually the enemy started showing up with all their cav. They've got quite a lot of it. It's mostly light cav though, so I thought we might be able to win this fight. I'll just leave these two units of auxiliaries to battle with the enemy. The problem we're going to have here is that the unit of auxiliaries on the left is going to try and shoot through the one on the right and kill all of my own men. I just know it, so I'm trying to micro it a little bit to reduce the chance of that happening. It also reminded me I needed to deploy my own cavalry, all currently still hidden, and we're going to go after the enemy's general, who's just marauding about on his own there close to the fort, probably wondering where his artillery's gotten to. So tons of enemy infantry in the centre now, but mostly focusing on my left, my centre left. So I decided I would fold the right side of the army out of the trenches. Going to lose that protection, but we might as well just put more guns on the enemy and shoot them faster. I think that should pay off. The explosive shells also now doing a little bit more damage because the enemy are in big blobby messes, dropping these shells seemingly randomly onto the centre of the field, doing damage to the enemy, so that's very nice. The Cav struggling there to catch up with the enemy's general, who's just running off in single file for some reason. So the mounted auxiliaries are now locked into melee with the light Cav. My guys are of course a ranged cavalry unit, but they're a very good one in melee because they are Native American units who have high melee stats, plus the enemy are only light Cavs. I'm hoping everything there will just balance out and we will be able to win. Meanwhile, my folding around of the right is now happening successfully, and I'm going to start blasting at more and more enemy units. And I'm just checking to watch the enemy's numbers, and you can see how quickly their troop numbers are dropping. They are losing men at an absolutely unsustainable rate, and we're barely losing anything. So it's all basically going exactly as I would have hoped. Still chasing the enemy general right to the end of the map. Now the enemy did get a flank attack on me with some cavalry while I wasn't paying attention, going to square up, and actually lost about half a unit of tribal auxiliaries who were sneaking around while hidden, so that was really annoying. We did kill the enemy's general though, so that's some consolation, and the Cav who attacked well repelled the moment I actually noticed things, started firing at them and formed a square. On the other side, the enemy's Cav attacking my auxiliaries actually got defeated in melee, so we are going to take them all down, and losses to my auxiliaries aren't too important right now, especially because they are such a liability as a unit. Now my regular cavalry is going to come into action as well. I wanted to see how good they would be against these totally unupgraded infantry, and the answer is they're absolutely amazing. You can see they just go through the unit and a pile of bodies is left behind where they just were. Absolutely devastating the cavalry charges against these super low tier infantry units. So we can just do that again and again and take on more and more of the enemy's infantry, and very, very soon there were none left, but all their artillery had now come out of the fort to potentially take part in the battle, only one unit actually having any line of sight on anything. So we need to now end this fight, and we can do that by charging those artillery down. I'm going to gather up my Cav and get them to come into this little gap in the fort and start attacking them. First it's the auxiliaries, giving the enemy a volley, which does basically nothing, and now we're going to charge in. I'm going to try and encourage these guys to charge all the way through the first units they see and attack those ones at the back, so we can rout them as well, because I've got more regular Cav coming in to finish those first couple of enemy units. So in melee, hopefully we'll just absolutely annihilate the artillery crew. The only difficulty we did have was that one of the artillery crews wouldn't rout. You can see here they're sort of stuck in the door, and we were left fighting this guy on a horse. He dies, his friends behind him commit suicide, and the gun just falls apart for absolute lack of will to exist. And their comrades inside the fort foolishly open the gate to see what the hubbub is about, so now my Cav can come in and kill them as well. So that is going to allow us to rout the final unit on the battlefield, bringing this fight to an end. It's a heroic victory for our forces, and really one that didn't even feel deserved. It was so easy. The enemy's strategy poor, their troops poor, and a victory province, Caracas, is now ours. Most of the territory the Dutch Empire owned had formerly been held by powers with different state religions. From Spain and France they had inherited a large Catholic population, and from Russia they had taken many Orthodox regions. In the Balkans and the Middle East they contended with Islam, and in India a long-fought battle between Muslims, Hindus and Buddhists suddenly became their problem. Official policy was to force Protestantism upon all subjects of the empire. But in most regions outside of North America, the task was so enormous and even dangerous that missionaries made little progress. With roots going back thousands of years, expelling Catholicism from Europe or Hinduism from India was no easy task. So thanks for watching. We're going to escalate the war against the Ottomans and the war in India in the next episode of Sinews of War.